I'm going to call this Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Service Committee meeting to order at 5:34 p.m. Ms. Dooley, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, we may. Greg Snyder.
Present.
Joyce Ruff.
Present.
Sean Levy.
Present.
The roll reflects that all members are present.
Okay. Does someone move for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and it's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, so that passes unanimously. And move for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
It's been moved and second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Item 2, information or discussion items. Proposed social studies curriculum renewal working draft.
All right, so we have Mark Grensky, has been doing some work with the social studies teachers and is going to present some initial work that's being done and looking for feedback from this committee, if I understand correctly. All right. No, I would join the meeting and then screen share.
All right, good evening. My name is Mark Grensky. I am the Curriculum and Data Coordinator for the district. One of my roles is to help lead the Social Studies Department. And I've been working with the social studies teachers over the last couple of years in and around COVID and all of the challenges that has presented to bring forth an updated social studies curriculum that we would like to share with you what our thoughts are tonight, get your feedback, and then use that feedback to bring forward in the coming months some official course proposals for implementation in the ideally near future. The background of this work: in 2018, the state issued new social studies standards. The new standards, they are hyperlinked in the presentation. They were a balance of skill as well as content. And one of the major new features was an inquiry strand, which was trying to move the social studies away from a recall and more into a discipline that students had to focus on critical thinking and analyzation. And the standards really ask students to think, if you do them right, the standards are going to ask students to think like a historian, to be able to be a historian by thinking like a historian, to be a geographer by thinking like a geographer, to be an economist by thinking like an economist, and so on. So the standards were out in 2018. In addition, 2 years ago, our intermediate schedule changed to where social studies was being taught every day instead of every other day or every other week paralleled with science. So we had an opportunity here to create a much larger and thorough social studies curriculum to match that. Student data was not meeting our expectations from the forward exam. And then as we got the intermediate teachers together, 6-8, as well as the 9-12 teachers in the same room, and they were talking about what they were teaching, we found out that there were some overlaps between the curriculums in terms of specific content being taught, as well as some gaps of things that they felt should be covered that weren't. And so this would be an opportunity to try to balance that all out so that there would be a nice cohesive curriculum from at least grade 6 through 12. And similar work's going on with K-5, but the presentation tonight is really focused on 6-12. One of the first things that the Social Studies Department did a couple years ago was they crafted their own mission, vision, and purpose statement. And I will not bore you with reading the entire thing. It's on the screens and such, but I will highlight a couple of the key phrases that I think this work really ties around. And this was the 6-12 team as a whole. They wanted to design a vertically aligned curriculum. They wanted to make sure that that curriculum was rigorous, engaging, and culturally relevant. They wanted to make sure that that curriculum built students' confidence and curiosity to lead them to critically analyze their world and give them the skills and desire to make their world a better place. And those were all their phrases that they came up with and their ideas. Last year, the 6-12 teams were spent our PD time working on unpacking the standards. Then the teams met to discuss potential scopes and sequences between the 6-8 team as well as the 9-12. The high school scope and sequence was run by the high school administration. They provided their feedback and some tweaks were made to it. And then at the beginning of this school year, at end of the summer, beginning of this year, the teams met to craft some essential questions of which they'd like to build the courses around. And over the summer, grades 6 and 7 actually built a pilot unit to see what it would look and feel like. And our hope is that with your feedback and support, that potentially grades 6 and 7 could roll out these new courses next September. And the high school, which has not written any of the courses yet, they've just come up with their essential questions, that they could ideally, or we could ideally roll them out the following September. The following slides then are what our curriculum currently is in these different grade levels, and then on the right-hand side are the proposed essential questions. 6th grade currently is a world history course, which largely goes through, the first, well, from early man, early humans, to about the Middle Ages. What we're looking to do with the curriculum in both 6th and 7th grades is, the current 6th grade course is the world history, current 7th grade is world geography, current 8th grade is US history. By having such a large focus just on history and just on geography in grades 6 and 7, the standards to be taught well, and so that our students will be able to be proficient on them, at least proficient on them by the time they graduate, we need to make sure that we're far more purposeful in our making sure that we have economics and political science and behavioral science as well as inquiry in those grades. So what we'd like to do is to transform these courses a little bit from being just a straight out ancient and classical world history course into a course that really hits and targets all the different strands of history by asking some essential questions that gets kids to think about where am I in the world, which would be a geography focus. Who am I, which would be very much a cultural and behavioral science approach. How do we solve problems, which would be political science. I don't need to read through all of them, but you can get a sense as to where the course is going as a way for them to get that exposure and build those, the skills in those standards throughout each grade level. So that is grade 6. This is grade 7. Grade 7 was a geography course that was dominated by just a study of each continent along the way. Once again, looking to have some units that are dedicated around different themes and content strands within the social studies standards. Now, if the question would become, where is this content going? If you take a look at, say, the 6th grade curriculum, which was at ancient and classical, you can see that one of our essential questions in 6th grade is our society more similar or different to ancient societies? So looking at, instead of like 4 to 6 weeks on Mesopotamia, 4 to 6 weeks on ancient China, 4 to 6 weeks on ancient India, combining those commonalities between those different societies, and then having a comparison to our modern day societies and have the students determine, are we more similar or different? You know, there were roads, there were buildings, there were governments, there were businesses that were developed, there's specialization of labor. In so many ways, they're identical. But of course, the details in those ways are completely different in many cases. And have students answer that question and really get that analysis piece between the two. The classical societies like Greece and Rome and such, Han China, if you look at the proposed 7th grade curriculum, what makes an empire great is where we'd look at those. So instead of, once again, 4 to 6 weeks on just Rome or Greece or Han China or Gupta India, it would be taking the highlights of each of those different societies and talking about what really makes an empire great. And then the beauty of this also is it's going to allow us to go and grab different societies that aren't necessarily in that one source and allow us to be far more global in our reach, bringing in societies from South America and Central America as well as Africa, which if you would just go through the book and what the current curriculum is set up as, those chapters and information come much later in the book. This will allow us to pick and choose our different content and bring it into that question for a much more well-rounded view of the world. The 9th grade course is currently a U.S. history course, which basically runs from World War I to present, so about the last 100 years. And you can see the proposed essential questions on the right-hand side. The content to answer these questions would largely be from this last 100 years. 8th grade U.S. history is our current course. They were already very aligned to the standards, so there's minimal tweaking that's occurring there, but not a full rewrite. But content from the last 100 years would be used to answer those questions on the right-hand side. And you can see, once again, they're very thought-provoking questions, do not have right or wrong answers, but the idea is that at the end of each unit, the student would have to answer that question and then justify it and support it with the details from each of those units. The units in all these cases here would be built basically through the term I use is case studies. So what is, if we look at that first bullet there, under what circumstances should the U.S. intervene in world affairs? The teachers, when they sit down to write this unit, would think of 3 to 5 case studies from, say, the last 100 years and use that as case studies for the students to analyze that question, for them to determine under what circumstances should the United States be involved. And obviously, if we think the last 100 years in U.S. intervening in world affairs, you know, you have the big one, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, as well as political involvement, United Nations involvement and different things like that, cultural involvement, you know, all those different aspects of how that could be built. But choose some of those case studies to bring it in there, so it's not that the content on the one side is gone, it's just being taught through those questions where students then have to provide an answer to it at the end. And 10th grade is currently a world history course where students choose 2 of 4 different courses. The name of the 4 courses are on the left-hand side. And it would become one course that all sophomores would take, with those essential questions being the foundations. And in parentheses are the different strands of the standards that would most closely relate to them. 12th grade American democracy would have minor changes, but I just thought I'd bring that forward. The content really would change very little, but what they're looking for their 3 essential questions to be. That is a term-long course. It's 9 weeks, so they have 3 essential questions. The other courses we're targeting about 6 essential questions as an 18-week 2-term course. So that's kind of an overview of the work we've been doing, why we're doing it, and what we're hoping to accomplish. What we'd like to find out is what your thoughts and ideas are towards this, so we could take that back to the team and consider how we could work those ideas and thoughts into our work and bring forth a proposal that makes everybody happy.
Board members, any questions or comments or feedback you want to offer?
I really like the move to the more analytical thought and looking at the comparison between different times. And I think that really is a much it's a great way to engage student thought instead of just memorizing dates and facts of what happened, but to really understand what's happening. You know, I like that, the direction that this curriculum is moving the instruction to. I think it would really benefit the students.
Thank you. I'd encourage you, if you have an opportunity and have nothing better to do, check out the hyperlink on the second slide of the Wisconsin State Standards. You can see exactly what students are being asked to do. It's quite challenging.
What type of assessments, not all, but what types of assessments are you using to evaluate the students' knowledge and retention of the information that they learn?
In terms of for our future, like for these courses, what would that look like?
Yes, sir.
Well, it would be, some people would call it a performance assessment, but it would be something where one of, the expectation would be that the students would have to answer that question for that unit. So if the question is, the essential question is, how should people get the resources they need? So 10th grade, the second one, which would, they would have to answer that question. And obviously that question cannot be answered in a true, false, or multiple choice format. Not to say there may not be a small portion where there may be some vocabulary and such that's being, monitored and checked on. But the bulk of each of these assessments for these need to be the students answering that question with a clear, direct answer and supporting it with, justifying it with evidence from the unit. So really building those, that skill of, if it's a historian or history type question, that they are speaking like a historian, analyzing documents, analyzing past situations, and coming up with an argument based on the evidence and bringing that forward to answer the question. If it's a geography question, they have to use the skills of a geographer of interpreting maps and understanding human geography and how people move and why they move to answer that question. So it would definitely not be something that is a rote memorization or a recall, but it would vary largely between class and question as to what that would look like. But it would be something where the students would have to perform, in quotation marks, their answer to that question.
And the only thing I would add, good evening, is this is really an opportunity to exercise disciplinary literacy, right? Reading, writing, and speaking and thinking through the lens of a historian, through the lens of a geographer. And so when Mark's discussing or talking about case studies, we're allowing students then to read through multiple case studies or learn about them and using evidence from text, and that text doesn't always have to be just writing on paper, but multiple mediums of text to apply to that overarching question at the very end, right? And that's what we call evidence-based writing, which again overlaps and aligns to the standards. Yep.
Yeah. So some feedback that I would offer, thank you for your work. Looking at the diversity of our district, I'm a former social studies teacher myself, is in the subject matter, what is really going to, as it's organized, I understand what standards are, but what are we doing to really capture our students' interest as these things are presented? One of the reasons for me as a social studies teacher, when I was a student in Beloit, in social studies, we read, and we actually had the opportunity to talk about our society, our world, the opportunity to discuss matters of race, and even here in Beloit. So when I think about our white population, our black population, our Hispanic population, when I think about the history of the Great Migration and Fairbanks Morris, when I think about the recent immigration of our Hispanic families in large number to this community, and all the diversities that exist within our student body, where is it in this curriculum that kids say, wow, that's me, that they're excited? And along with studying the world cultures, also seeing the ability to understand things about how things came to be today, and like you said, the inspiration to be able to improve as they're comparing. Those would be the things that that I would look for and offer feedback to. that when we're presented again, that we actually think about that. I think that through the social studies, especially at the high school level, that is a place where I look to see that students have come alive with a fire because they are doing things that are actually relevant and feel that they are engaged in being empowered to change a situation. So that's just some of the feedback that I would offer in the presentation. In the 6th and 7th grade, understanding that 8th grade is a U.S. history class, what is what's the span on the 8th grade U.S. history course?
Up to about World War I.
Okay. So, and then so the 6th grade class is like a world history and 7th grade is a geography?
Currently, as it stands, yes.
All right. Yeah, so like I said, the idea of understanding the Americas, the diverse cultures, a focus on Africa, that I think that those things, some punch,
Yep.
where we can see it and the students can see themselves reflected. It's just as we are, we're in a time where people are trying to forget things that have happened in our country. I think our democracy is being challenged right now. And I think that the goal of social studies education to create effective citizens, that we have to teach them what the principles of democracy are and ensure that that we have hope that this project, this experiment can continue. So thank you for your work.
Not a problem. I'll just respond slightly in wanting to keep the presentation brief, but the teachers as a whole are definitely wanting to do that. And I think if you look at the mission, vision, purpose statement, which we look at every time we meet before we start, rigorous, engaging, and culturally relevant hits right on that. I've talked many times when we are working on this, what is going to capture our kids' excitement, because the skill portion of the standards, we get to pick the content we want to go with it. There's not a list in the standards of here's the 50 or 100 things that need to be taught. So we have the flexibility to do that. And the department as a whole and the teachers as a whole are on board with that. And as we flush out each of those units, I think it's a matter of picking what are the best examples to do that, making sure that all of our students, whether it's based off of skin color and or gender, and or personal factors, see themselves somewhere in the curriculum, and they are on board with that. It's just a matter of we've not gotten to that point of flushing out the details, wanting to hear your feedback first.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add is just, in that vision of understanding, critically analyzing their world, that, our goal is to prepare our students to be poised to have critical conversations from multiple perspectives. And so something that we're really excited about is as we develop this out, it's going to give us opportunities to look at materials that offer relevancy, that offer, case studies that aren't from one dominant narrative, right? Which unfortunately, in our past practices have sometimes come out, we're only teaching history from one dominant narrative. And so we're excited about that, and we're excited to engage stakeholders, groups too. We actually just had David O'Connor present to our district last week, and he does Native Studies for the district, or for DPI, and he is going to be working with our Social Studies department. And so we have other folks like that, and Mark has expanded those partnerships for other courses. So we'll be bringing those perspectives in as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mark.
3A, Environmental Literature Course Proposal.
All right. So shifting topics, we have Mr. Bosco, Anthony Bosco, coming up to talk about a couple of course proposals. And again, similar to our new practice, these will be coming back again on the 14th of December. And if approved at that time, we'll go to the full board for consideration if approved at the committee level on the 14th. So turn it over to Tony.
Good evening. We'd like to present an exciting literature course addition to our Beloit Memorial High School course options for English, aligned with college career readiness as well as Wisconsin English Language Arts standards. The new course will also align well with key career academy structures and offer students an opportunity to study the challenges confronting our planet through rich text exposure and analysis, as well as hands-on problem-solving opportunities that will inform their and future generations' role in addressing priority environmental issues. I'd like to introduce Deborah Somerville from Beloit Memorial High School English Department to briefly describe the course and answer any questions the committee may have.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Somerville. Can you hear me okay? All right. I'm an English teacher, but I will do my best to keep this brief. I've been developing the course for approximately a year now, with the overall aim to help our students become stewards of the environment while exploring it through the lens of literature, both nonfiction and fiction texts, with the overarching theme of it being American literature and a problem-solving approach. In order to appeal to our students and make it relevant, the course content allows the students an active voice and choice in what they study and towards their assessments as well. So although they might be writing a narrative essay, their narrative essay has their own voice in it based on content that they've been studying given a range of topics. What I'm most excited about is the inquiry-based and research methodology that would be employed in the later units, allowing them to actually choose a topic locally that they want to explore, to interview people, and eventually create sort of like an environmental summit or a solutionary congress, which would also involve the listening and speaking skills that are often challenging to integrate in a secondary English course. If you don't mind me taking one more moment, I really love the essential questions that guide the semester-long course. It would be offered first semester and then again second semester to all students who have passed English 9. So, for example, visiting the poetry of our First Nations, students would be dealing with the compelling question, how do humans express their connection to nature through their cultural values? And then once connecting with nature, they would move forward to explore the awe of nature. How does the awe of nature inspire art? And we would practice visual literacy by looking at paintings and photographs and then using those to write their own poems, choosing one that they would like to base a poem upon. So they'll be learning poem analysis and then writing their own poem. Continuing forward into the third unit, they would explore the role of nature in the understanding of themselves and our changing social values. As society changes, is it always for the best of our planet? What role do we play in helping to serve our home and learn how to sustain it? One step further is how our human values, attitudes, and behaviors are actually shaping Earth's destiny. And then moving into term 2 is where we begin to explore a more solutionary lens by looking at the intersectionality of environmental and social injustice issues and how they affect Americans today. It's a very pressing topic and very relevant locally and, of course, nationally and globally. Moving forward with that, by now, the students have begun to understand nature as a persona. We'll explore what rights does nature have, different aspects of nature, such as rivers. What responsibility do we have to preserve the rights of nature? And that, of course, leads into exploring environmental issues that they are most interested in, that they would like to learn to advocate for and have their own voice. So as you can see, I'm very passionate about this, and it allows the students a wide variety of possibilities with both content and products. It's very much both a project and problem-based course where they'll be working together and collaborating as well as expressing themselves through different forms of art and writing. So that's as brief a synopsis as I'm capable of, and we'll open it up, of course, to your questions.
Board members?
And you're welcome to sit in on the course if you'd like to.
There are so many different organizations out there that are advocating for different things within the environment. As I look through this, I could see all of these different groups wanting to get their fingers on the course and get their point of view in. Have you thought about how you can temper what you're getting from the different groups so that the students analyze that information and base it on more than one group in their research?
That's a very important question, and that's part of the reason why this needs to be an inquiry-based course, is for students to be asking their own questions and looking for the sources that will answer their own questions so that they can think critically about what's out there. It is important to understand all of the stakeholders as we move forward, looking for solutions that best serve our community and our own needs. So I have thought about it. I think the short answer is that a lot of it will be up to the students with my guidance, with me as the facilitator. I would ideally like to bring in guest speakers and also go on field trips. It's important for the students to be outside. The course has to do with connecting to nature and learning an appreciation for it. I hope that answered it a little bit.
So a couple questions. One, the course overview and syllabus, is that the syllabus intended to be used for the course?
At the moment, yeah, it's in draft form.
Okay. And the template, this is just a curriculum question, is that the template for all of the high school courses?
That's correct. As we go through the renewal review process for our curricula, those will be the templates that we'll use.
Okay. And then with the course proposal, as this is going through the cycle, I saw the signatures at the end. It's gone through like the committee process, and then it's coming to the board for approval, and then to be added to the course catalog for course selection.
Correct.
All right. And this class, once again, this class is at what level?
10th through 12th grade.
Okay. All right. And so just a question of curriculum, if this class is being added, and you think about all the other electives that are there, what is it displacing as things are coming in? Is anything coming out, or we're just offering and seeing what will fill by student request?
There is not, in discussion with the high school administration, there is not a removal of a course for this to replace at this time. Because of the nature of the topic and the substance of the course, we felt that it would create its own market.
Okay.
So there wouldn't be removal of a course plan at this time.
All right.
But I mean, as we go through those scheduling processes, obviously, we'll keep an eye on those enrollment projections and those course selections.
All right, got you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you in person, finally.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And this will come back again next month for action, and then it'll be, if approved, it'll move on and get into the course catalog and everything.
Correct. If it is approved on the 14th, and then at the full board, then it would be in, the timeline would be such that it could get included into the course guide for next school year.
All right, so we're now at 4, our next meeting date. Our next meeting date is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021 at 5:30 PM. And B is adjournment. Would someone like to move for adjournment?
So moved.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Good evening. We'll get started here shortly. All right, good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, November 16th at 6:34 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to call our Human Resources Committee meeting to order. Ms. Dooley, may we please have a roll call?
Yes, we may. Megan Miller,
Present.
Spencer Anderson,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Sean Levy,
Present.
Joyce Ruff,
Present.
Greg Snyder,
Present.
and Allison Simmerl.
Present.
The roll reflects that all members are present.
Thank you so much. At this time, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Levy, second by Schneider. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. At this time, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes from November 2nd?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Schneider, second by Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. That takes us, motion passes unanimously, and that takes us to item 2, employment recommendations. Does anybody need to go into closed session at this time? All right, that takes us then to item 2B, which is the presentation of employment recommendations, exhibits A and B. Does anybody have questions at this time? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, I will start with Exhibit A. So my first question, when we're looking at the assistant principal additional compensation for duties, again, why is the board being asked to approve an item that started on September 1st and concluded on October 4th? I say this every 2 weeks, but I'm really uncomfortable with us being asked to approve something that has ended long ago.
So again, the situation presented itself that in unpacking the absence of the principal at Cunningham, there were individuals that we discovered through talking with the individuals at the building level that took on extra duties because of that absence and never shared that they wanted the additional compensation. We felt that it was our responsibility to bring that. So that's why it is coming late to this. And again, the ideal would be to have these available beforehand, and in situations where we know there's going to be an absence, we would bring them. But in situations where there was an absence, sometimes they occur during or after those events. So this is one of those areas where it fluctuates depending on the specifics of the circumstance.
But it seems like what you just described is different than that. The work was done, no one realized the extent of the work that was done. They didn't want the money, and we're saying, no, this is the right thing to do to pay you, which I'm in full agreement. You need to pay people for their work.
Correct.
Okay, here's my thing. I'm very uncomfortable with approving things. It's not even really approval. Like, it already happened, it's over with. So is the message out now that if you have taken on additional duties, you have every right to be compensated for that, but we want to do that in a timely manner? I'm assuming everyone needs their money and they want it in a timely manner, and I feel bad that we are just now paying people for something that happened 2+ months ago.
Well, I just thank you for your explanation, because it causes me to reflect on sharing this with you, the board, and the public that no one is losing out on money. This is additional compensation. And in this particular situation, the individuals never came forward. We approached and said, you are owed this, and we would like to do this. There wasn't necessarily an objection to getting paid extra money, but none of this is taking away money. This is money that was over and on top the contract that was already approved for them.
So it is taking away money if we're asking people to do additional work and not compensating them. That's asking people to work for free. So we don't have to deal with the nuances here. For my next question is Rosa Nahara. I believe I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Again, this started August 23rd and wrapped on October 11th. We've had 2 meetings since then. So is this the same thing if we discovered someone else who had done additional work and we never paid them?
Correct.
Okay, so what is being done moving forward to catch all of those areas where people have done extra work, where they have earned compensation, so we can clear that up so this does not continue to happen?
So in part, between Ms. Armstrong and myself, if there are absences that due to a vacancy, and we are reaching out and saying, are there people picking up additional duties and responsibilities because of this? And then that's how we're going to better address that.
Perfect, thank you so much. And is there now a permanent secretary at Cunningham?
Correct.
Yes, there's. The other side to this as well is as we continue to grow our sub pools, we are hoping we won't have to ask or have individuals covering vacancies, that we would have the ability to put a secretarial sub in there so that we can minimize some of these asks of people, because continually asking people to do the additional duties is hard on them as well, in that you're asking them to do their job plus more. So we are trying to address that through increasing our sub pools as well.
Perfect. My remaining questions are on Exhibit B in the interview panel, so I'm absolutely willing to yield the floor if anyone else has questions on Employment Exhibit A.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have Employment Exhibit A questions?
I've got a question about the matrix. I need to understand something about the matrix.
All right, so last call for questions on Exhibit A. All right, hearing none, if you wanted to continue with your question for Exhibit B.
Please, thank you. All right, so moving on to Exhibit B. At our last meeting, Ms. Armstrong, you informed us that PC, or Principal's Choice, is the equivalent of $500. So my question is, when did that begin?
That was to begin with the approval matrix in July. However, in finding Mr. Beard's notes on the matrix and what the board had approved, we had originally submitted some of the first ones at a lower amount, and so we are correcting those as we discovered that in the presentation by Mr. Beard and Dr. Keyser, that principal choice was to stay at the $500. So we recognize that some of the earlier ones were at the wrong amount, and we are correcting those.
And when you say earlier, could you kind of give me a time window of which ones that you're reviewing that need to be adjusted?
It would be any of the addendums that we've issued for the 21-22 school year. So typically those started coming in August, but we would be looking at anything that we approve for 21-22, starting with July 1, because that is the date those went into effect.
Okay, so the PC equaling 500 should have always been the case.
Yes.
But just to revisit, when did that start?
The 500, it has, in prior payment schedules that they had that Ms. Esden had provided, it was all, Principal's Choice was always $500. So when they presented that in May, and to the board for the sports addendums and the matrix, that was in there to stay the same as a district-issued $500.
Okay, I was concerned because that didn't seem right when you said it at the last meeting, so I went back and looked at the October 5th employment recommendations, Exhibit B, and there are actually 9 positions that say PC, and none of them are $500.
Right, they were following the lower matrix based on the elementary and intermediate school addendums that Mr. Beard had had identified, and that at the middle of October is when we discovered his notes that had the $500 for principal choice and made that adjustment. Now we're going back, and we actually sent out emails to the majority of those individuals this week stating that it was incorrectly reported at this rate and it should be $500.
Perfect. So will the board get an updated list of the previous amount and then the new amount so we can have an idea of what the financial obligation of that is?
I can most definitely put that as an addendum list to next presentation.
That'd be great. And then my other question is that, again, on the October 5th employee recommendations, it listed PC Destination Imagination for Todd, but it was $232, which if you look at the addendum, Destination Imagination should be $1,000, and I asked why that was different. And the explanation we were given is that was just exploratory, it wasn't competitive.
Right. They actually have a larger Destination Imagination, which I did some research on that after our conversation. So they have their $1,000 stipend that they are giving, and then they have 2 additional coaches that we're splitting that principal's choice.
Okay, so it's not exploratory, it is competitive.
Yes.
Okay, so the 232, why wouldn't it be the 1,000? Or if you had 2 people splitting the principal's choice, it would be 250, correct?
No, because they have someone receiving the $1,000.
Okay.
And then they had 2 additional people that they want to use principal choice for additional Destination Imagination. So they don't have 2 $1,000 addendums to submit for 4 people. They had, or 3 people, I'm sorry. They had the $1,000 that every school is given for Destination Imagination, and then the principal has opted to use her principal choice of $500 to pay the other teachers. And I don't know without looking right at this moment if she did $500 to both of them or if she split it with $250. But if they're showing $232, my assumption off the top of my head right now is that it was one person that should have been $500. But I can go back and add that to the list of what you'll see as adjustments.
Okay, because my question was then going to be, I see Robinson is on there this evening for $1,000. So my question that I believe you just answered, but I want to confirm, was that why did Todd have the exploratory group, but Robinson had the competitive? And it seems like Todd has the competitive and they have additional. Is
Yes.
that accurate?
And that was a misstatement by me when I was thinking it was exploratory.
Okay. That is all the questions I have for Exhibit B, but I do have a question about the interview panel, but I can wait.
All right, sounds good. Vice President Levy, did you have a question?
All right, so I'm on the matrix, and I'm looking at the band, the jazz band, the concert band, the choir, and the orchestra, like our music programs. And I see the amounts that are listed. Are those coming from the district budget, or are those coming from the principal and the building budget?
All addendums come from the district budget, and that's what, those monies are assigned to buildings, but it is a district-funded addendum. So when we start talking about the athletic clubs and sports, those are listed on the matrix, but the funding accounts that are used are from General Fund, Fund 10. The only things that are ever funded outside of Fund 10 are some of the Fund 50 lunch supervisions that are in the cafeteria only. So all of these come from district funds, but when we identify those district issued, those are issued by the district, not by school.
Okay. So concert band, jazz band, at the intermediate and the elementary levels, those are district, issued at the district level. Are they, do we have people that currently have those? They've been issued for this year or no?
Let me interject. At the intermediate level, those aren't district issued in the sense that we assign them. It's at the discretion of the principal. So if the principal designates someone for those addendums, then they don't get assigned.
Exactly. The funding source is district funds. However, everything on those activities and athletics are decided by either the athletic director or the building administration. So all of the clubs, all of those band, jazz, everything is determined by their building principals.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So for the interview panel diversity report, I noticed that 3 of the interview panels list 2 Black females, and I'm hoping that it's not the same 2 Black females for all 3 of those interviews. The spirit behind this is, yes, we want racial and ethnic diversity, but we also want diversity of opinion, lived experience, et cetera. So, and I could get, if you are not certain, if it's the same 2 people. But if you do have that information, hopefully it's not, but if you could share.
The 2 identified at an elementary school, those are the 2 same individuals, and those are the building administrators in their building. I only see 2 where that's the only 2 people that interviewed. The one at Memorial had a full team, and those, of course, would be different individuals.
Okay, perfect. And then my other, not necessarily a question, but a comment. Well, no, it is a question. Is there a reason why there's no other BIPOC representation on the remaining interview panels? And for anyone listening at home, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color. We're a very diverse district and community, and I just don't understand why we can't reflect that diversity on our interview panels.
We continue to work with our building administrators to make sure that the teams that they have on their interview panels are diverse. I will say the substitutes, in trying to increase our subpool, those are primarily handled in the HR office. If they have the ability to have a substitute license and they want to work in the district and they can go through our background and all of our checks, then that is one HR individual who is putting them on a sub list. And that has been practiced in this district for many, many years. So there isn't a formal interview process for a daily sub. Now, if you get into the long-term subs where they're in their building and or the permanent building subs, those are interview panels that we would have with them. But we continue, to your point, is making sure that all of our building and hiring administrators know that we want diverse panels.
And I hear that, but my concern is it's not being consistently reflected on these reports, and that was the reason for requesting the report, so that we can see the payoff of the efforts.
Right.
So I'll just leave it there, but it's concerning that we're not seeing consistent diversity in our interview panels, because that matters.
Okay. And I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on Exhibits A, B, or on any other attached documents for the Human Resource Committee, item 2B? All right, thank you very much for all the information and for the discussion. It looks like since we're not going into closed session, we can skip 2C. All right, so would anybody like to make a motion to approve Exhibit A, Exhibit B, or both?
I move to approve both.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Employment Rec Exhibits A and Exhibit B. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, thank you. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, which again, we can skip 2C, skip 2D, and that takes us to item 3A, our next meeting date. So the next meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 30th at 6:30 p.m. Just a reminder to anybody viewing that we tried to bump up our meetings in order to get everything in before the winter holiday break. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 30th at 6:30 p.m. All right, is there any other business for the meeting this evening? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Levy, second by Anderson to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Awesome. All right, thank you. That concludes our Human Resource Committee meeting, and we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for our business meeting. Thank you. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so we will be starting presently here. Just a quick heads up. All right, good evening. It is 7:01, Tuesday, November 16th, and at this time, I'd like to call our business meeting to order. The Board of Education would like to let our families and viewers know that our regular board meetings are being simultaneously interpreted. You can watch the Spanish interpreted meeting through the link found at the board website under the Watch Meetings tab with tonight's date. In order to accommodate this interpretation, we will be monitoring the pace of our meeting to allow time for the interpretation. And I would like to remind our board members and others speaking to please speak one at a time. Thank you so much for your consideration and understanding. The other thing I'd like to do quickly before we begin is I was greeted, and we were all greeted tonight with some beautiful artwork from Robinson. And could all of our board members with your cameras on, could we just show off? Look at the amazing artists that we have at Robinson Elementary. Mine is from Eric in the 2nd grade, who were kind enough to share their work with us. So just wanted to recognize that for folks who are here in person. Here you go. Good stuff. Yeah, we can clap for that. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much, artists. That was awesome. All right, let's see. I lost the agenda. Here it is. Okay, and at this time, if we could please have a roll call.
Okay, Spencer Anderson,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Sean Levy,
Present.
Megan Miller,
Present?
Joyce Bruff, Greg Schneider,
Present.
Allison Simro.
Present.
The roll reflects that all members are present.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dooley. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Board Member Anderson had previously requested that we move item 8A above item 7A so that people from home can hear our future board meeting dates. So could I please get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Semrau, second by Anderson. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Great. Motion passes unanimously. And at this time, I'd like to ask Board Member Levy to please lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. That leads us to item 2A, to public comment. First of all, is there anybody here wishing to make a comment? Okay, great. So I'll just read quickly. We have our norms. Members of the public are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Robert's Rules of Order will be followed at all times. Individuals attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Individuals wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and ordered meeting and to prevent discussion of confidential matters in a public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not to district employees, students, or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Speech that is belligerent, disorderly, disruptive, repetitive, or which exceeds the allowable time permitted for each speaker is prohibited. Concerns regarding specific district personnel are not appropriate topics to be addressed during an open meeting comment period and should be handled in accordance with district policy and procedures. Concerns or questions regarding students are prohibited. Response from the board, if any, will be limited to clarifying inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the speaker, or acknowledging that the speaker has been understood. The board will not debate with an individual, and the board may not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting's notice or agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule an individual who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the individual's opportunity to address the board will end immediately, and the microphone will be turned off. Thank you so much for your participation and courtesy. Ms. Dooley, do you want to call our first person up, or are we ready to go?
Yes, we have Miss Eunice Glass present.
Thank you so much. It looks like we might be having some technical issues. What, oh, we went offline? Okay. Well, Miss Glass, I'm so sorry for the delay. I think, we'll wait until we're all set. No emails too? Okay, great. So, Ms. Glass, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much. It looks like our YouTube or something went offline. Thank you. And it looks like it's all fixed. So I don't know how much folks missed at home, but we just read our norms for public comment, and we're inviting Ms. Glass to come to the mic to make her comment. Thank you all so much for your patience. Oh, Ms. Glass, I'm sorry. We're going to turn the mic on for you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. My name is Eunice Glass. I live at 2035 South Mountain Avenue, Beloit. I'm representing Job, NAACP, Concerned Black Citizens. And what we're doing is just asking, the last time I spoke here, I asked a simple question, which it was not the board members have completely changed. But I never got an answer to that question. I wanted to know, why was it necessary for all of the black administrators and teachers to be removed? I never got an answer. If any of you have the answer to that, I still would like to have an answer. What I'm asking for is for those people that was, I say, forced out when there's an opening, to make sure that they are invited back. I also found out that there's many more black students being suspended than it is of any other race. I would also ask you to figure out why that is. There's a reason for it, and it needs to be stopped. If those children are suspended from school, they have no education, they're not going to get a decent job, it's a pipeline to prison. Other things that we are asking is to make sure that true history is taught. I don't think most people know what critical race theory is. So if there's a very little in the history books as it is, but when I subbed, they simply skipped that chapter. So I think the true history should be taught so all kids know what really happened in this country. And I will close by saying, just because a person has a bachelor's, master's, PhD in education does not mean they're qualified to teach in all places. If you don't think that all kids should deserve to be treated alike, then you shouldn't be where there's different races of children. You should go where there's the race that you are not biased to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Glass, for coming to speak this evening. So no other public comments at this time? All right, thank you very much. What's that? Sure. Certainly. All right, so that brings us to reports to the board, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Keyser to introduce our student board representative that we're so glad is here this evening.
Thank you, Board President Miller. So I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Karina Gonzalez, who is our student representative. As with our shifting, I want to take an opportunity to thank our professional educators, our paraprofessionals, our people service staff, crossing guards, cafeteria workers, and admin staff, and so many others who teach, engage, and guide our students each and every day. I want to thank them for their contributions and continued commitment to our students. Our staff arrive each day with the focus on our students' academic, social, and emotional well-being. And as part of our Thinking Beyond Now, we are trying to promote and inspire and encourage our students to stretch their minds and guide them to opportunities for growth, both in school and in life. With that, I also want to, in regards to the unfortunate time that we had to close our schools on Friday, want to send out a sincere thank you to Chief Sales and our city manager, Lori Luther, for their efforts in partnering with us in the school district and in the community so that we can keep our students and staff safe. And our continued investigations into the allegations, into the racist hate speech and threats of violence against individuals and within our district and within the community, many of whom are across state lines, but we continue to investigate so that we can hold those parties responsible. In that work, I also want to thank Ms. Cristopa and Ms. Acevedo, who spent most of that week sifting through the thousands of posts within social media and filling out numerous forms on these social media complaint websites, resulting in a number of these groups being taken down and banned from further use of the social media platform. Unfortunately, that only keeps people down for so long. And so we know that this is only a temporary fix, but the long work of rebuilding and repairing the damage that has been done to our individuals and in our district and our community continues so that we can find our way back to our joy and make this district a thriving district. I also want to take the opportunity to bring, and I know this will be covered in the business board report, but opportunity to share with the board switching topics to our budget priorities and share with the board and the community as we work towards our next business board meeting and develop a budgetary priority list that will then, at the next budget committee meeting, get refined into categories. As Board Member Anderson has shared and do not want to steal his thunder from the board report, just put up on the screen for the community and for the full board to see the list that has been generated thus far, and ask that board members please feel free to email me your additional thoughts that you would like to see added to this list, so that then we can develop these and refine these into categories that will then become a part of some budgeting models using our Baird Forecast 5 tool, which is scheduled to be released to us. Baird is currently building it. They're scheduling to release that in December. So the timing of having our priority list and that forecasting tool coming together, we'll be able to build out some models that then we can present to the committee and then ultimately the full board. With the goal being, we want to know where the board's priorities are well in advance of some of the contractual obligations that we have throughout the year, and make sure that we are building the budget that the board's expecting and meeting the expectations not only of the board, but our district and our community. So with that, I will, if there's anything that's top of mind for board members on this priority list, feel free, I can add that now, but please, between now and November 30th, if you have any ideas, please just send me an email directly and I'll add that to this list. That will be shown again at that committee meeting.
Thank you so much for your report, Dr. Keyser. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions or comments to any of the topics that Dr. Keyser addressed? All right, thank you so much for your presentation, and I know that board members, we're all aware to forward your budget suggestions along to Dr. Keyser, right? Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And that takes us to our committee and other reports. Is there a, looks like there's an error there, that's okay. Is there a report from Chair Anderson this evening for Business Operations and Finance Committee?
I have nothing new to report tonight. Dan actually covered the one thing I was going to do is actually remind everyone to make sure that they're sending their priorities for the budget to him.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chair Anderson. Chair Levy, Teaching, Learning, Equity, and People Services Committee, is there an update tonight?
The Teaching, Learning, Equity, and People Service Committee met today at 5:30 p.m. We received information and discussed proposed social studies curriculum renewal, offered feedback to the team that is designing new curriculum for 6th grade, 7th grade, 10 and 12 for courses. And we also had information about environmental literature course proposal, a new course to be added as an elective to the course catalog for course selection for the upcoming 2022-23 school year. At our next board meeting, at our next committee meeting, we will take action on that item. That's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chair Levy. Item 4C, the Governance Committee. We met on the 1st of November, and we had a really robust discussion. Later on in the agenda this evening, some of this will materialize. So we discussed Dr. Keyser's evaluation calendar going forward. So we talked about the cadence of that, and then we will hear more later from our attorney, just kind of giving us an overview of what the contract says. And then when it gets specific, we will go into closed session to continue that discussion. And then there will be additional dates where in open session we finalize how we will move forward. So that was one of the pieces we discussed at Governance Committee. We talked about looking at different models for evaluation going forward, all centered around the concept that in order for us to all be good leaders, we need to practice continuous improvement and development, because being exceptional for the students and community that we serve is always a work in progress. That's a nice takeaway that I wanted to share with everybody. So we'll take a look at some of those different evaluation tools, but that'll be couched into the discussion later because there are implications in the contract that affect those evaluation models. And we also talked about onboarding for new board members, and we will be convening again. I can't remember the date now off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's in our stuff for later. We will be putting together a slideshow to kind of help with our onboarding for new board members, and building in a calendar for periodic self-reflection for the board so that we ourselves can continuously improve. So that was more or less our discussion. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much. That takes us to, if needed, legislative and policy updates.
Thank you. So the legislative update is attached if anyone is interested in reviewing that document. But just an overview, there are currently no upcoming meetings for either the Senate or Assembly Education Committees. So that goes out. So there's nothing scheduled for the next 30 days. There are currently 14 items before the Assembly Education Committee. All of those are listed in the report, and they have been there for at least a month or longer. There are currently 3 items before the Senate Education Committee, so there's been lots of movement there. 2 of the 3 items are new new. That's SB 561, and it is relating to requiring school boards to report information regarding credit recovery courses. And SB 563 is also new, and it is relating to required instruction in civic education in the elementary and high school grades, high school graduation requirements, and requiring the exercise of rulemaking authority. So please feel free to check out the report if you want more in-depth information. It also includes contact information if you want to reach out to representatives on either the Assembly or Senate Education Committee. For policy, the only update is that the committee is meeting tomorrow, which is different. We typically meet the first Wednesday of the month, but we had a little bit of a shift this month. So we'll be meeting tomorrow at 5:30, and we are scheduled to review several policies that cover administrative and staff absences and leaves.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Board Member Levy? Chair and Legislative Liaison? No? All right, thank you very much. Fantastic. So that wraps up item 4, Committee and Other Reports, taking us to item 5, the consent agenda. Typically, there is no separate discussion of the items unless a board member so requests, in which event the item or items will be removed from the general order of business and considered in their normal sequence on the agenda. Would anybody like to remove an item at this time? Hearing none, would anybody like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda? Or to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Schneider, second by Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Pardon my interruption. Thank you very much. And that concludes item 5. Next, action and discussion items. Item 6A is a donation acceptance, and I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Armstrong at this time.
Thank you so much. I am very excited, as is Ms. Beavers, to come to the board. The district was approached by the Occupational and Physical Therapy Department from Beloit Turner District in wanting to donate a Rifton Pacer gait trainer. It's about a $25,000 piece of or $2,500 piece of equipment. Yeah, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? That will allow us to better serve our older and larger students in the district. They had a student using this piece of equipment that has graduated, and they have looked at their needs. They have no other students that would need this equipment for now or in the foreseeable future. So they wanted to ensure that the equipment could be used, and it will allow more mobility of our students and less burden on their caretakers as far as being able to walk with them and ensure the safety of both the student and the staff. They've already identified a student that would benefit from this, both at home and at school, that will enable that student to have more mobility and less burden to his family or the staff at Beloit Memorial. So I am respectfully asking on behalf of Amy Smith, the physical therapist, and Ms. Beavers and the district for the board to accept this donation from the school district of Beloit Turner OT and PT departments.
Well, thank you. That is wonderful to hear. Is there any discussion before any action is taken? Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. I'm sure you vetted this, et cetera, but for example, like you're not supposed to use a used car seat. Are there any, seriously, are there any legal risk? Is everything certified and up to code and it's fine for us to use this and that has been checked? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just giggling because that's a great mom question. It's okay. All right. No, great question though. Any other questions before we take action on this item? All right. Would anybody like to make a motion to accept this donation?
So moved.
Second.
So I hear that there's a motion and a second to accept the donation of a Riften Pacer gate trainer valued at $2,500 from the School District of Beloit Turner OTPT Department. Is that correct? Awesome. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you so much on behalf of our Student Services Department and the district.
Thank you, and thank you very much for bringing this up to us, and thanks again to the School District of Beloit Turner. That's fantastic. All right, so motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6B, discussion of superintendent evaluation and contractual obligations. So before we get started, I'm going to invite Mr. Bukema up in a moment just to give us an overview. So when we approved Dr. Keyser's permanent superintendent contract, it was quite a while ago, and there were many different faces on this board. So we thought it would be prudent to invite our council to come in and give everybody an overview of sort of like the nuts and bolts of how it works. This is new to most of us on the board. I will just give everybody a heads up that for the most part, questions are going to have to be taken in closed session due to the personnel issues that, because we're discussing a specific employee of the district. But of course, if you have just like a clarification that you want to make, feel free to ask, and Mr. Bukema will advise us on whether or not we can answer it in closed session or in open session. Okay? So any questions before we get started, or is everybody good on what we're doing? Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bukema, for joining us this evening.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Am I supposed to be seen in this computer, or is it okay if I'm not seen?
I think you're good.
Okay. Well, it's a privilege to be with you tonight. My name is Rob Bukema, and I've had the honor of representing the Beloit School District for, hold your seats, over 3 decades. I was 16 years old when I started, but just joking. But it has been, I won't even tell you how many years it's been, but it's been an honor and a privilege. It's also good to meet the new board members for the first time. Congratulations on your appointment to the board. Board President Miller asked me to be available to answer questions for the board and to provide a high-level brief overview of the superintendent's contract and evaluation matters. And I will try to address these items in open session to the greatest degree that I can, unless there's some specific advice or interpretation you need, and then we have a closed session reserved for that. As an introduction, based on the statutes and policies and my experience, the board has a multiplicity of roles and functions, and this would be a fascinating conversation. And while it could be debated, I think 3 of the most important roles are the following: the hiring and evaluation of the superintendent, and the governance of fiscal affairs of the district, and establishing the policies of the district. And I think it would be great to discuss these roles and what they mean, but that's outside the purview of tonight's meeting. It's the first issue on that agenda, hiring and evaluation of a superintendent, that is the focal point of tonight's conversation. And you might ask, well, why is this coming up now? And the specific issue is that there are some roles and responsibilities that the board needs to address in the next few months dealing with the superintendent's contract and evaluation. And the board leadership would like those matters clearly understood and addressed in a timely fashion. So that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. In summary form, those 2 broad issues for the board to consider are a possible extension of the superintendent's contract term, and then also the superintendent's evaluation to be performed by the board. Those are the 2 large areas of responsibility. With that foundation laid, the board president asked me to give a brief overview of the contract itself, and I'll try to do this at a high level. With regard to the term of the contract is a 2-year contract, which is the maximum number allowed by state law. And the contract term currently is July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2023. Now, there's specific language in the contract regarding possibly extending the contract by 1 year, and that's addressed in 2 specific ways. The first is that the board needs to decide by January 15, 2022 if you want to extend the contract by 1 year. And there's specific language in there that allows the board then to address that issue on January 15 of each succeeding year as well. So that's permanent contract language. Then the second part of that is that after December 31, the board is going to discuss whether you want to amend the contract in the future to provide for automatic rollover language. More specifically, it would be in the express terms of the contract how such extension would be handled. And that conversation will take place after December 31. The contract also includes the following broad provisions: administrative responsibilities, salary, other indirect compensation, also known as benefits, specific indemnification language which protects the parties' rights, liquidated damages, and language regarding non-renewal and termination of the contract. And then there's also a provision on board and administrator communication, which I believe you've already dealt with. Within the first 3 months of the contract term, the parties are supposed to get together and talk about procedures and processes for communication. And then no later than October 31 and each succeeding October 31, the board and the administrator meet to discuss their working relationship and communications. I call that a communications schema or communications protocols, and I understand that that is ongoing, and that's a conversation that you've had. And then finally, evaluation. And here's what's specifically addressed in the contract on evaluation. Periodically, but no less than once per year, the board provides the administrator a written evaluation. And then the evaluation process, structure, and content shall be by mutual agreement between the board and the administrator. So those are the two key capstone issues. There's also a specific reference to board referral of complaints or concerns to the administrator under the contract as well. That's the contract. Shall you wait to ask any questions until after I get into the other aspect of the policy on evaluation, or shall I deal with the contract questions now?
Yeah, thanks for pausing. Does anybody have questions at this time, or should we keep moving forward? It sounds like we're good to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. And then briefly, I also was asked by the board president to make sure to address the other responsibilities that the board has. And as you probably know, the board has a policy, two policies on superintendent evaluation, 225 and 225 Rule 1. And a brief summary of those is as follows. Those call for, and I will reference the fact that areas of conflict between the contract and policy, in this situation, the contract would govern. So because you've got to read those two things together, board policy and administrator contract. Calls for an annual evaluation as well. The board to provide feedback on job performance to the superintendent. The two specific areas, broad areas mentioned, are identify areas for growth and commendation. And then annually set timelines and tools, and that's the process you're undertaking right now. And those things, evaluation is based on management objectives established by board and superintendent, the superintendent's job description, and major personal and professional traits. And then finally, a couple of timeline issues. There's a June 30 and a January timeline referenced in policy 225 Rule 1. No later than June 30 deals with the verifying of mission and long-range plans. And then thereafter, looking at the job description, the other forms, et cetera, and that's what you're in the process of doing. And then in January, specifically reference superintendent reports progress on the goals and also provides a self-evaluation. And then thereafter, there's a board evaluation. And once the evaluation's complete, progress is shared with the community. That is as brief as a lawyer can be. And also has tried to be as very specific and address the areas of responsibility that the board needs to deal with. But that is a summary of the contract and a summary of the policies dealing with evaluation.
Thank you so much for that overview. And I'm going to open us up for questions in a moment, but I just want to throw out to the board members and get some of your feedback if you have a moment. For the other purpose was also to discuss the statutory timeline. So we had a very lengthy discussion about the hypothetical timelines. There are a couple of different approaches that we could take. And at our last governance committee meeting, and as we entered that discussion, do you have any recommendations on what past successful board and superintendent evaluation kind of cadences and calendars have looked like?
I think trying to provide as much completion by January. In fact, December and January are key months. And if you take a look at the policies broadly, administrator contracts begin to be discussed at that time, because by the end of January, generally speaking, especially in a year when the contract's expiring, then the board would need to be making decisions specifically with regard to those contracts which are expiring. Now, in this situation, the contract for the district administrator is not expiring, but there's contractual responsibilities to look at a January timeline. So those are built in, not this time by statute, but this time they're by contract. So if you can complete a lot of this by January, the end of January, normally would be a very good thing to do.
Thank you. So just to clarify, because we had a lot of discussion on this at the governance committee meeting, it is appropriate for us to anticipate the process of figuring out whether or not we want to do the renewal and the automaticity of that renewal, and looking at the superintendent's self-evaluation, and then completing the superintendent's evaluation should be done probably by the end of January. Is
Right.
my hearing correctly? Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for that. All right, so Mr. Buikema covered a lot. Did we have questions? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so Rob, can you, in regards to state statutes and administrator contracts, and then the specific contract that we have, in a general sense, the time frame of, as you're prescribing us to do our work, like I said, our superintendent's contract is not expiring this year, but what is with the state statutes and, like you said, the order of work that we should be in so that we are in the right sequence of things. We just finished the interim superintendent's evaluation.
Yep.
Which was a major task considering the composition of the board at the time and everything now.
Yep.
And what we are trying to do is to be functional body operating as good employers, starting with the first employee all the way through the system. So can you help us set those things in order?
Yeah, I can. In the situation with Dr. Keyser's contract, and I can address this, the specific questions in closed session, but because there's got to be a discussion about extending his contract term in January, at least there's got to be that discussion. You know what I mean? So it's not a contract non-renewal situation, it's a renewal situation. So by contract, you have an obligation to discuss it, where in theory, with a normal administrator under current Beloit rules, you would look at it upon contract expiration, 5 or 6 months before contract expiration. So then you'd be talking about looking at it in 2023. So then you would have time to complete an evaluation into 2022 and still be timely. But in this situation, you're probably going to want to converge those issues and say by January 15, at least be able to have a conversation by the board saying, do we want to extend Dr. Keyser's contract for a year?
Great questions. Any other questions, comments, clarifications at this time? Okay. I wanted, while we're in open session, to talk about our timeline for evaluation. So there are some dates coming up that we had identified in the, let me just pull up my notes real quick from the governance committee meeting. Okay, so we had a couple of different options, and I'm curious if at this time, I guess I want to just quick check in with the board. Do we feel prepared enough at this time to talk about setting dates right now for times to, well, we already have some times chalked out, but some times to discuss and begin the evaluation process for Dr. Keyser? Or is this something where we want to go into closed session, discuss the closed session details, and then formally establish the timeline at the next meeting? Kind of where, could somebody speak to their kind of comfort level on that? Go ahead.
I just have a question for clarification. I know that we had discussion about every other month, spending a little bit of time in closed session, and one would be to informally discuss Dr. Keyser's progress, and then the other months would be to do a board self-evaluation of how we are doing.
Yeah, and
Is
just-
that separate from what you're asking about right now?
I want to quick clarify. So the board self-evaluation would be an open session, but yes, what we would be definitely doing in closed session would be, we could do sort of both. Like we could give that informal feedback, but I think we need to set some deadlines, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like we have to have decided by like this meeting date. I guess what I'm looking for to clarify, by this meeting date, we will have determined the contract language about whether or not we want to do the extension. By this meeting date, we will have determined whether or not we want to build any additional language in, et cetera, et cetera.
It sounds like, if I'm following what Mr. Buikema laid out, those dates are already established. Like he said, January 30th, he threw out other dates. So I would say at least the meeting before that date.
All right, that makes sense, sure. How are other board members feeling about that? And I will just say, basically what we have kind of informally scheduled at this time, let me just jump back, is we have a closed session this evening to talk a little bit about like those specific kind of feedback details. On November 30th, our next board meeting, we have scheduled an open session discussion about the contract renewal, which we might not have if all of our questions were answered tonight. And we could maybe just, I think our goal that we set at the governance committee was to formalize, let's see. Yeah, the closed session, I think, was to have the discussion about formalizing the, what is this, contract extension conversation. But that decision can't be made until December, isn't that right?
No. Just before January 15th. But the idea of whether you're going to put permanent language in the contract takes place after December 31.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. So we can start to, is everybody comfortable with starting to have those specific discussions then, starting in closed session, going forward on the dates that we've established going forward? So we have one tonight. We've got the 30th. We would have to, again, just to iterate those dates, have the contract language stuff figured out by January 15th. Is that correct? No later than?
Right.
Right, okay. So is everybody feeling good about that? All right, so then kind of our final deadline then to determine the rolling over, hypothetically rolling over language and any other changes to the contract would be January 15th. Go ahead, Vice President Levy, that's fine.
Right. Do we also need to produce another written evaluation before, like around January 15th? Is that something else that we need to do?
If the board would like to have that as part of its assessment about whether it wants to extend the contract, the board could also look at those two things as independent, or, if you want to have data or a finalized evaluation before you make that decision, then I would say yes.
Yeah, kind of just as a processing out loud, is the question, like I said, the permanent superintendent contract started July 1. If you're looking like in a regular situation by June 30th at the close of the school year to produce that
Correct.
that written evaluation. But now we're starting July 1, and we're saying that to help us make a decision about a contract provision, we may provide a written evaluation from July 1 to present.
Correct. And I think that's something you can also discuss in closed session as a board to decide how those two things would dovetail together.
Okay. Because like in that process, you could have an evaluation that goes from July 1 to, let's say, December 31st, and then December 31st to June 30th. And then, so that's kind of what we're trying to get to, that sequence of when are we as a board producing
Right.
written evaluation.
And it says multiple times a year, but not less than one. So, it allows for more feedback than just once.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, Sean, that's great questions. Yeah, go ahead.
It is a great question, and doing a little bit of talking with other superintendents, both in the area and around the state that I've intersected with, that it is really a board's purview and comfort level on the cadence in which the evaluation is done. I know of some superintendents who get their final formal written evaluation at the end of the school year, but the informal conversation and the conversation around the contract happens mid-year to comply with the statutory timelines, which are also adopted within board policy. And other districts try to keep those in sync, so the formal written evaluation comes in the mid-year, and so it's off cycle with the calendar school year.
One of the things that I've been concerned with as we have conducted evaluation was one, we have informal or formal board member meetings, individual board member meetings. But in that in-between time, that is the action of one board member, which is just, feedback for you individually. And I think like it spoke to like board policy around June 30th or thereabout of having those goals. And those are some things that we made note of in the last evaluation, that strategic plan, vision, goals, they're a part of some things that are mentioned in the superintendent's instrument that, as a board, we're working to establish those things, but they're not necessarily in place. So in some ways, the evaluation, it's a process of what the board and the superintendent are supposed to do together. And as we're working to address those areas that the board has not had in place, that's important. But then also the other value of the formal evaluation is so that 7 board members have gotten together to speak with one voice, so that you're not being whipped around by 7 different individual thoughts and opinions, but you as a superintendent have the clear vision of the board and know what to operate on, that feedback is important for you to be able to be effective in your job, so that we can increase student achievement and manage the organization. So those are the concerns that I've had then and continue to state for us, so that as we fulfill our duty, it's a productive work relationship that continues to build stability for all involved.
I agree. Thank you.
All right, that sounds perfect. Does anybody else have thoughts or questions at this time? It feels like we have a pretty clear, firm directive on how we're moving forward. We have an established deadline, and we do have an opportunity to go into closed session to bring up items specific to Dr. Keyser's, review and any feedback that we want to give. Okay. So are we good to wrap up on this topic, or are there any additional thoughts or questions? Here's my Marzano 5-second wait time. We are good. Okay, great. So at this point, I'm going to move us then to item 8A, as no action was necessary on this item. Item 8A is our future board meeting dates. So we do have this weekend an upcoming board retreat scheduled for establishing a vision for to kick off strategic planning with Dr. Lewis from Battelle for Kids, which is the agency that we contracted with to consult for the strategic plan. That will take place this Saturday, November 20th at 10 a.m. We hope to be wrapped up by 1, so we will figure out food and things like that as well, okay? There is a policy board meeting, policy board committee meeting on November 17th, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. We have a business operations and finance committee meeting next on November 30th at 5:30 p.m. Our human resource committee of a whole meets November 30th at 6:30 p.m. Our regular board business meeting will also meet November 30th at 7 p.m. The next policy committee meeting will be then December 1st at 5:30 p.m., followed by Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services, which will meet December 14th at 5:30 p.m. Our Human Resources Committee of a Whole will then meet December 14th at 6:30 p.m., followed by our, I believe, our last regular board meeting of the year then, December 14th at 7 p.m. Are there any questions or changes? All right. That concludes all of our open session business for this evening. At this time, a motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have motion by Schneider, second by Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Dooley, could we please get a roll call vote?
Yes, Allison Simuro.
Aye.
You say aye. Okay, Greg Snyder,
Aye.
Joyce Ruff, Megan Miller,
Aye.
Sean Levy,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Spencer Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. It looks like we have a unanimous vote on that. Again, that does conclude our open session business for this evening. Thank you all who attended in person. It was great to see everybody tonight, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you. You have been removed from the